Do you like Arabic folk tales? Do you want a gender-swapped Aladdin retelling, basically, but with better lore and more interesting characters? Well, friends, I've got the book for you. Hi guys, welcome back, bienvenue, and all that jazz. It's time to talk about some books. Or specifically today we're talking about the brand new book, The Stardust Thief from Chelsea Abdullah and Orbit Books. I believe it's her debut novel. I'm pretty sure, and it's a start to a new fantasy series. And long story short, today's video is going to be a review of that new book. So let's just dive right into general thoughts and opinions. So this book was a ton of fun. It gave me all of the Aladdin nostalgia vibes, but also had the roles gender swapped because the thief character was the female protagonist and the prince was the male protagonist, and he needed a lot of help and it was definitely kind of that nice switcheroo that kind of kept the story more interesting and fun. But it is just so much fun to see stories from other folk tales and things from other places of the world besides just like traditional medieval kind of fantasy that we're so used to. This book was full of jinns and magic and magical items and just so good, and there was tons of twists and turns. So in this world, the humans and the jinn are kind of almost in this covert war where humans want to kill jinn because their blood has magical properties. It can create water in the desert, grow plant life, heal people, all of these different things. And so people want the jinn magic. The jinn can also enchant different objects and relics for different purposes. And so there's kind of this underground black market for jinn artifacts and blood, and the Sultan of the kingdom hates the jinn for reasons that you find out later in the plot. I won't go too far into them, but basically our main character gets convinced to go on this quest to find this magical lamp for the Sultan. I really don't want to give too much away because some of the whimsy is just being swept up in the story, but this story definitely feels almost like somebody's telling it to you. Do you know what I mean? It's almost like that kind of oral story tradition feeling. There are also multiple interludes that are exactly that. One of the characters telling a story about the jinn or the history of their world, and it's just so good. So much fun. I really enjoyed it, and I can't recommend it highly enough if you really like that kind of desert fantasy, Arabian Nights, Aladdin type feel, but in book form. Look no further. So overall, I would give this book 4 out of 5 stars. Some of the characters weren't my favorite. I didn't dislike them, but I also wasn't immediately in love with any of the characters either. But with how this book ends, I am so excited to read book 2 because it definitely is a cliffhanger. If you've read it, you know what I mean. But with that, we'll dive into the different parts of my review. So we'll start now with part numero uno, Spanish. And that is the magic and the world building. So like I said, the magic in this world is very centered around the jinn. And so the jinn have different abilities. Different jinn have different abilities. There's some shadow jinn, some fire jinn, and above all of the jinn are the jinn kings, and they can do multiple different kinds of magic. I don't want to give too much away about the Jinn Kings because there's definitely more revealed as the story goes along, so you should just read it and find out. But that is where the magic is really centered around. And the world building, I really enjoyed the way that it was delivered. When we needed some more information about past events or past world building, the author would slip in these interludes and weave it into the story of one of the characters telling this oral story to his friends, and through those stories we learned more about the world building that we needed to know. So I thought it was a very clever way of, I wouldn't call it even info dumping, but it's exposition that you get to learn more about the world building through, but it's more just woven into this culture of people tell these oral stories to each other, and so it didn't really feel like a drag or anything like that. And so I really enjoyed all of those moments where we had the stories, and it just made you feel like you wanted to snuggle up around the fire in the desert with the wind blowing in the background, and it was just fun. I just thoroughly enjoyed it. So with that, we'll move on to part de French. And that is the characters. So the characters were fine, but I think since this book was more told in that kind of oral storytelling tradition, folk tale type thing, and it very much gave me all of those like folk tale-y vibes, I never found myself being particularly attached, like emotionally, to any of the characters. And I personally, as a reader, I don't tend to do that. But if you are a person that like gravitates towards characters, maybe the story would glow even more for you than it did for me. But I just was swept up in the whimsy of the world building and the magic and the plot, and didn't necessarily care as much about the characters. And whether that's just me or the characters themselves, you should read and find out and let me know. And so since I don't have that much to say about the characters, I'll just skip right on to part 3. Brazilian Portuguese. Oh. And that is the plot. So the plot, I think, is, along with the magic and the world building, is one of the fun parts of this story. It starts kind of almost like an Aladdin type setting, where we have our thief character who gets chased out of like the marketplace by the guards and taken before the Sultan, all of those kinds of things that you kind of remember when you were watching Aladdin when you were younger. But like so many intricacies to the story are so different, and once we leave that home city on our journeying quest to find the lamp, so good. So many like, oh, we're going there. Oh. There's a lot of throats being cut. There's a lot of people being burned alive, and but it's told in kind of like a whimsical way, so you just kind of like glaze right past it. But there is definitely violence in this story. But like I said, like the way that this story really shines is because it feels like somebody just telling you this story around the campfire at night. And so I would highly recommend that you just dive into this book head first and see where it takes you, because I think if you do, you will not be disappointed. It is just super fun. There is lots of action and adventure and backstabbing, and then there's an overarching plot of like political machinations going in the background. So even for you political people who just love like the political aspects of the fantasy, there's lots of that going on as well. And I can't recommend it more. I would also say for people who are like more hesitant and don't like a strong romance plotline in their fantasy, this first book especially has almost none. I don't think there's a single smoochy smooch. I don't think there's any of that stuff in this book whatsoever. It's just a fun, adventuring tale with good friendships, good banter, and lots of magic and action sequences and pearl gas, you know what I mean? Like all of those fun things. So you should read it. And so with that, my friends, I guess I'll wrap up this review just saying, read it. And if you've already read it, hop down in those comments down below and let me know what you thought, or if you plan to read it, or any of those things. And like usual, while you're down there, go ahead and click that like button and subscribe if you haven't already to see more reviews, bookish things, bookish tags, all that fun stuff from me. Other than that, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye!